Okay, good morning. So I think in the yesterday's class we were discussing about John Locke. So regarding Locke, you read about Locke's view of human nature. Then you are able to connect to Locke's view on state of nature. Then you are able to connect to Locke's view on social contract. And through understanding his idea of social contract, now we can understanding what kind of state he is speaking about. So what kind of state Locke is speaking about? Constitutional state or a limited government. So what do you mean by a limited government? So obviously a government where it is accountable to the people. So government where the powers are limited through the contract. So here what are the limitations on the state? One, you can say the natural law. So what is the other limitation? Natural rights. Then the other limitation is the contract. And okay, you can also see that Locke's state is based on the consent. Of the people. So these are certain limitations which are there on Locke's state. Means state cannot act arbitrarily. So this is where you need to connect Locke's view on law and liberty. So compared to Hobbes, what was Locke's view on law and liberty? He says, where there is law, where there is law, where there is law, there is liberty. So what I say? Where there is law, there is liberty. And if you look at what did Hobbes said, Hobbes said, liberty is where law is silent. Liberty is where law is silent. But here what he said, where law is there, there is liberty. So in this statement you can say Hobbes gave an antithetical relation between law and liberty. Meaning where there is law, there you cannot have freedom. But here what is saying that where there is law, there is liberty. So here we need to speak about which law Locke is speaking about. He is speaking about the natural law. And according to Locke, natural law will continue to exist even after signing of the social contract. And for Locke, he believes that natural law and natural rights exist in state of nature. Why? Because man has reason. Since man has reason, he'll be able to understand that you should not harm others' property, you should respect others' life. And that is why he says in state of nature, natural law and natural rights existed. And they continue to exist even after the contract has been signed. So, according to natural law, you can say it has given certain rights to the people, natural rights, like what? Right to life, right to property, as well as right to liberty. And these rights are sacrosanct. Sacrosanct meaning what? They cannot be taken away by the state. So these rights will act as a limitation on the state. So when the state makes laws or when states take certain decisions, it should not harm these rights. So in a way, this natural law, what it is doing, it is enhancing the liberty of the individuals, and it is curtailing the powers of what? The state. And hence what Locke says, where there is law, there is liberty. So the end of a law is what? It has to enhance the liberty of an individual. So according to Locke, what he considers as a law, anything which enhances the individual liberty, not anything which curtails individual liberty. So for example, if we look at we have in Indian Constitution, you have Article 17, that is what? Abolition of untouchability. And in that regard, the Parliament of India has enacted the Protection of Civil Rights Act, right? 19 means before it was called as the Abolition of Untouchability Act, but later renamed as what? Protection of Civil Rights Act. And same way they have also brought SC/ST Atrocities Act, a Prohibition of Atrocities Act. So both these laws are brought to what? It is brought to enhance the liberty of certain sections of society. You get my mind? So for Locke, he is giving a positive correlation between law and liberty. Law can enhance the liberty, but here, which law is referring to? He is referring to natural law. So compared to Hobbes, where he told natural law will end in the social contract, for this fellow, it will continue. People will continue to enjoy these rights. These rights are not given by the state. These rights are naturally given to them, and state cannot harm these rights. Got it? And that is why he is giving a positive correlation between law and liberty. So for Locke, means the other thing, what we can say from a Lockean point of view, if there is no law, there is no liberty. So if you look at a previous year UPSC prelims question, what they have asked, I think in 2017 or 2016, I am not sure, but they have asked a question, which of the following are the most logical deduction what you can make. So if you see, they have given 4 options there. One, they have told, if there are more laws, there is more liberty. Second option they have given, if laws are made by people, then there is liberty. Third option they have given, if laws change too often, then liberty is in danger. And fourth option they have given is that where there is no law, there is no liberty. And they told which is the most logical statement among given the 4. This was a UPSC prelims question in, I don't know which year, but it is either 2016, 2017 or 2015. Either of these 3 years they have asked this question. So obviously there they have asked which is the most appropriate relation between law and liberty. So many times what students will do here we have not read in Lakshmikant. This is out of syllabus. It is not given in our book. It's not question of any book. It's a question of common sense. That's what I told. To clear UPSC exam, most importantly, you need common sense, which is very uncommon these days. So what students will do, most of the time just buy out books. Same Shunya, vision. They don't have vision, and they get up getting Shunya on in the exam, in spite reading Vision 360. Because that's the thing, see, that's what I told. End of the day, this clearing this exam is nothing related to you coming from IIT background, you are coming from government school background. Purely it is based on, do you understand the exam? It's not even connected to you being some intellectual. This is not some, we are finding some scientist, we are finding an economist. No, plain and simple. Nobody is asking you to be an economist. No basics of economy. Same way, here nobody is asking you to be a political scientist. No basics of political science. So logical is that if you see the first statement, what they told, when there is more laws, there is less liberty. Not necessary. You can't equate, means you can't take the Hobbesian logic here and think that, okay, if there are more laws, there is less liberty. That's not the case. Or second, when they told laws are made by people, then you'll have, not necessary, it's not depends on who makes the law. It depends on what is the law. Whether the law is made by God, whether the law is made by people, etc. Or the third statement, when laws are changed too often, it endangers liberty. Not necessary. You can change laws according to time. So among all the statement, one thing that logically you can tell, if there is no law, there is no liberty. Means think like a traffic junction. There is no signal. You are free to ride the vehicle however you want. So it leads to what? It leads to loss of freedom for everybody. It leads to chaos. So the answer for that question was that statement, where there is no law, there is no liberty. Alright, so many times I've asked these kind of questions in prelims. So even if you have not read political science, you can answer that question. But you need to be logical in the examination and to be there, you should have solved questions. These things and all you won't gain by just reading more number of times. You should have solved more number of questions. Only then you will be able to solve it in the exam. Got it? So understand here what Locke is saying, where there is law, there is liberty. So for Locke, there is a positive correlation between law and liberty. So what Locke says, the end of the law, end of any law should be what? To enhancing the liberty of an individual. The end of the law should not result in taking away the liberty of individual. And that is why John Locke is also considered as what? Father of liberalism, the father of constitutional government. Correct? And John Locke, he is also like brings classification of government, like what Aristotle did. But in more simple terms, he told monarchy when the law is made by one person, aristocracy when the law is made by few people, and when democracy, the law is made by the masses. Okay. For Locke, he also has spoken about the idea of revolution. Means he also speaks about the individual's right to revolt against the state. So he says that for him, when there can be a revolution or people can revolt against the state, when the state breaches the contract. Means when the state has not acted according to what they've agreed into the contract, because he considered state to be a trustee. Trustee means what? We have trusted the state with certain responsibilities. And what is the responsibility of the state? To enhance our liberty, to provide protection to our property, life, as well as what? Liberty. So when this trust is broken by the state, he says that you have every right to revolt against the state. Means revolution, he is not speaking in terms of a Marxian revolution that involves violence, because for Locke, since man has reason, there is no need for violence to bring any kind of change. He can bring changes through what? A smoothful transition. In simple terms, you can say revolution can be also seen as changing those who are in power, bringing somebody else in power because they failed to keep up the trust what they've done to people. So what does he mean by breaking the trust? It can be if the government fails to implement the law that has been enacted, or if the government brings laws that are contrary to what? The individual rights, or if the government fails to provide you security. All these can be grounds for what? Revolution. And for him, revolution, as I said, it does not involve violence. It is basically changing those who are in power. So you get a point. So here it does not mean the contract will end. This contract now is transferred to somebody else. So in simple terms, you can say in India also, when we do elections every 5 years, the people are voting on the government. It is basically based on deciding when the government has kept their trust or not. If they have not kept their trust, people might bring them out of power and bring a new government into power. Got it? So this is also one of the reason, again, what we consider Locke's contribution of the growth of the ideology called as liberalism. Okay. And one more thing, what makes Locke also the father of liberalism is his views on property. Because when you look at the ideology of liberalism or the ideology of capitalism, so what is the relation between liberalism and capitalism? Liberalism is less profit. Hmm. No. What is the relation between liberalism and capitalism? You can say liberal principles applied in the field of economics, we say it is capitalism, the principle of laissez-faire. The philosophy of liberalism in the field of economics resulted in what? Capitalism. Means the ideas what are there, because in liberalism, what are the central idea? They believe that individual is more important, they believe that freedom is more important, they believe that liberty is more important, and they believe that what? State should not intervene in an individual's life. The best thing the state can do to anybody, not involve in them, give them freedom. Liberalism as a philosophy believes that what? It believes in the idea of atomistic man. What do you mean by atomistic man? That the entire society is like comprised of each individual's atoms leading their own life. So they believe that man can be at his best when you allow him complete freedom, when the state does not interfere. That is what the philosophy of liberalism believes, the foundation. The same thing you apply into economics. The economy will work best when the state does not intervene. So it is nothing but free market economy. Free market economy works on what? Demand and supply, the principle of laissez-faire. Got the point? So when we apply liberal philosophy into economics, we see the rise of capitalism. And capitalists, those who have money, traders, merchants. Feudalism transformed, the economic structure changed. No longer agriculture was a major source of economy. Now industries, factories emerged. So that is why a new group emerged, that is called as capitalists. Understood? So when you look back of this idea of what is this, capitalism or liberalism, again it comes down to John Locke, because John Locke's views on property. So Locke, when you look at his natural rights also, he told right to property is one of the natural right. And what did he mean? It is sacrosanct. Sacrosanct means it cannot be taken away the state. The state should protect your right to property. Every individual has the right to own property. So that is his viewpoint. So if you take right to ownership of property, private property is central to which philosophy? It is liberal philosophy. Who does not believe in the right of private ownership? It is socialism or communism. Communism opposes private ownership of property. It only believes in what? Common ownership of property. So that is why John Locke is also considered as what? Father of liberalism, because he told what? Right, every individual has the right to own property, and right to property is a central part of an individual's life. But it does not mean that Locke did not bring any kind of limitations. He did bring certain kinds of limitations. Means he never told that right to property is completely inalienable. He brought certain criteria that what kind of. So how Aristotle brought classification of ownership of property: common use, common ownership, common use, private ownership, or what is that? Private ownership, common use, which Aristotle told is the best form. Okay. So same way, even Locke has certain balanced view on property. So one, he says that every individual has the right to own property. It is sacrosanct. It is central. It's a natural right. But what Locke also says is that there are certain limitations when it comes to you owning property. So there are three types of limitations, he says. One, there should be equal opportunity. What do you mean by equal opportunity? Since you enjoy the individual right to own property, the same way others should also enjoy the right to own property. So if one person's right to own property is harming another person's right to ownership of property, then there can be certain kind of limitations that can be brought. Okay. Or second one, he says the whatever property that is there, it is there or it is given for us to utilize it, not to spoil it. So he brings the spoils limitation. Meaning what? When you have excess of property which is of no use, it's going waste. You are going to find simple terms. You can eat 10 apples, but you accumulate 100 apples. 90 apples might rot and go waste. So what Locke says that God has given property or resource for you to use it, not waste it. So limitation in that sense, what we can interpret, he is telling that you can't own how much ever you want, you can have to own how much you can utilize. Okay. Third limitation he gives called as labor limitation. What do you mean by labor limitation? Whatever you own as your property, that should be an output of your labor should be involved in it, or at least you should have purchased that labor. Purchase means you can employ laborers, pay them salaries, then you can own that property. But your contribution should be there for you to own that particular property. So even though he is a proponent of right to private ownership of property, but he does bring certain limitations. What limitation? There should be equality of opportunity, spoils system. Spoil means properties are not there to be spoiled, it is only to be utilized. And third one is what? Labor limitation, means you should have contributed your labor for you to own that property, or at least you should have paid and purchased that labor for you to own that property. So these are the limitation what Locke brings with what? Right to ownership of property. So in a summation, we can equate this same thing what Aristotle also said, private ownership, but it should be of common use. Somewhere he comes very close to that. And other thing what Locke does is that he's also rejected this, if you look into Christianity in traditionally, like you can say that God forbid Adam and Eve to eat this apple because means private property is something harmful. He rejected that viewpoint. He told no, private property is essential for an individual's growth. So God has not created these resources on earth to go waste. It has been created by God for people to utilize. And that is why he defends right to private ownership of property. Got it? So that is the other key component of John Locke that you have to know regarding his views on property. This in summary is major ideas given by John Locke. So if you look at major ideas given by John Locke, here you will find his views on human nature, his views on state of nature, his views on social contract, his views on law and liberty, and his views on the revolution, Locke's views on property. Then other things is not anything separate, it is an internal part what we have to just deduct. Deduct means Locke as an individualist. So Professor 1, what he says that everything in Locke's ideas revolves around individual, and Locke tries to create sovereign, individual sovereignty, means individual is a sovereign in the end. So how that you can say, you can easily tell now, the contract is signed by an individual, the contract is signed with the consent of the individual, and even after signing the contract, individual continues to enjoy the natural rights, that is right to life, liberty. He also recognizes the individual's right to ownership of property in that regard, and for him state is the means, individual is the end, because he has limited the powers of the state for enlarging the liberty of the individual. And hence that is why we say Locke's doctrine, it revolves completely around what? Individualism. So Locke started as an individualist and he also ended as an individualist, unlike an Hobbes who started as an individualist but he ended as a Absolutist. Here again, for this and all, there is no separate content as per se. You need to link that what are the elements of, if you know what is individualism. Individualism is a doctrine that believes that individual is the center of the thought process. Understood? And that is why many consider as what? Locke as an individualist, one of the greatest individualists. But there are also critics like Macpherson. Macpherson, he has criticized Locke as what? He says Locke is a professor of possessive individualism. What is possessive individualism? Where an individual acquires wealth, individuals retain wealth, or a promoter of capitalism in that regard. So that is one of the critics that they bring against what? John Locke. So these are major ideas of John Locke, what you have to know. Now when you look at his contribution, what has Locke contributed? So one, you can say that many consider him as what? The father of liberalism. Means the ideology of liberalism, the seeds were sowed by whom? Writings of John Locke, that is 2 treatises on government. And you can say the other thing, John Locke is also credited for giving the idea of a constitutional state. So if you look at modern day, many of the democratic constitutional state, it goes back to ideas of what? John Locke. You can also say that John Locke can be also given credit for what? Utilitarianism, because he again, end of the day, it is maximizing the liberty of an individual or the welfare of an individual. So he is also considered as one of the forerunners of utilitarianism. And you can say John Locke can be also given credit for establishing a secular state. The reason is that John Locke, he believed that state should not curb religious freedom. It should allow every individual to follow his own religious beliefs, and their beliefs have to be protected. But however, he did not support the atheists. Okay, he did not recognize the rights of the atheist. Atheist means one who does not believe in God. But he told you follow any religion, the state should respect you. And he's also been credited as a scholar of consent and tolerance. What do you mean by a scholar of consent and tolerance? Because if you look at his social contract, it is based on the consent of the people. Means modern day democratic governments are based on consent of the people. The other key aspect of a democratic government, it should be tolerant to different viewpoints. It should be tolerant to different religions. It should be tolerant to different ideas. And that is why he creates an idea of a democratic state. And John Locke is one of the strongest supporter of the idea of what? Democracy. The point. So, and you can also say in international relations, IR, when you read, John Locke is also considered as one of the forerunners of the liberal theory in international relations. What do you mean by liberal theory in international relations? Now countries should cooperate, countries create institutions. There has to be rule of law where countries will have to follow it. This is opposite to realism. In realism, like what Hobbes told, opponent without swords are nothing but words. There is always security dilemma. But what John Locke reflected, even in state of nature, means when there is no common authority, still it is, you can cooperate with each other because man has reason. So his ideas also later developed into what in IR, the theory of liberalism. John Locke can be also credited to the idea of human rights because he was one of the proponent or considered as the father of natural rights. That's what we say, na? The natural rights are human rights in its embryonic form. You remember? Natural rights are human rights in its embryonic form. So he has also been credited to the evolution of the idea of human rights. So hence, John Locke remains as one of a key figure in what development of the idea of liberalism. Or some also give credit to John Locke because even though he did not exclusively write, but from his writing, he has sowed the seeds of separation of power, and it was based on this fellow's idea. Later, Montesquieu, the French philosopher, was influenced by John Locke. He developed the idea of what? Separation of power. And today in modern democratic states, separation of power is one of the key aspects of a democratic government. You know, right, what is separation of power? Legislative, executive and judiciary, each one of them have to do their power within their own arena. They should not enter the other field. And why there should be separation of power? One, it will ensure there is no concentration of power in one organ of the government. Second, it will ensure there is no conflict of interest. And that is why separation of power is a very key aspect of a democratic state or a democratic government. So the initial seeds of separation of power was sowed by John Locke based on his writings which influenced Montesquieu. Montesquieu developed the core idea of separation of power. All these you can include as what? Locke's contribution to the development of political thought. Got it? And that is why we consider John Locke as what? Father of liberalism. So you have Lusky who says, Rousseau. So Rousseau is another person who is associated with liberalism, but he comes at a later age. If we take J.S. Mill, Rousseau, etc., he says Rousseau and other liberal scholars, Rousseau's and other liberal scholars have merely widened the channels, that has been already dug by Locke. Rousseau and other liberal scholars have merely widened the channels that has been already dug by Locke. What is the meaning of that? What J.S. Mill and Rousseau or others have done, they have not created anything new. Locke was the first person who has already given these ideas. They have merely widened these ideas and they have developed the idea of liberalism. But the initial, the initial this thing was done by, just a second. So it is John Locke who is actually first initially laid down the platform. All these people have built on it. So that is the meaning of the quote. Means even if they give in exam this quote, basically the quote is indicating contribution of John Locke to liberalism. Why he is called as the father of liberalism. Or you can use this quote in any of your conclusions. Means when they ask a question on John Locke as the father of liberalism, so there you can use this quote as your conclusion. Or if this they ask as the question, then you need to explain what is his contribution and how other scholars. But you have not read other scholars, right? You have not yet read Mill. Once you read Mill and all, you will understand why John Locke was considered as the pioneer of laying down the foundations of liberalism as an ideology. Got it? So these are the things you need to know about John Locke. So that's why I told, plain and simple, there are two approaches that you can use. One is just the knowledge oriented approach. What do you mean by knowledge oriented? Just keep reading till the end. You might become an expert, but that is not the criteria of this exam. Okay, mind? So I'm telling logically, if you see, even if you read about 100 pages about John Locke, you are going to get one question in the exam. And no matter how much you read, in this exam, even if they ask two questions about John Locke, maximum number of words you can write about him is 250. Even if I take 20 mark, two questions they give. So nowhere you are writing more than 500 words. So the challenge is always is about how we are able to bring our knowledge, what we have, into the paper within the given word limit. Because you have to be flexible. Before 2011, it was different. They used to give 60 marker question. You can write an essay. Again, mind. That's why I told, in every format, you can't tell everybody will play the same way. There will be some skilled players who can play well in test cricket, who can play well in one-day cricket, will also play well in 2020. But there will be some cricketers who are very good test players, but they are not very good 2020 players. For example, Cheteshwar Pujara, a good test player, but not so great 2020 player. So obviously, this is what happens when people say that I have political science background, I have done my MA, but still here they are not getting the score. The reason is different. There you are playing in a test format. In an MA question paper, you can write how much sheets you want. Simple, na? I think in your degree exam also, there is nothing called as a word limit. You can add 100 additional pages and write in the given time. But in this exam, you can't do like that. You have to write within the given space. It's more like a 2020 game. In a 2020 game, technically if you see, a cricketer who's not technically good, but can be still successful. What do you mean by technically good? He does not have any technique that is required for an actual cricketer. He's a jugaad player. He might still succeed. He might not succeed in test cricket, but he will succeed here. The reason is that this is a very short format of the game. Same way in UPSC also, this is a very short format. This is not a lengthy PhD what you write. It's just a short format, 150 words what you are going to write. And in that, you have to catch the eye of the evaluator. And that's why I say, this is not a knowledge-based examination. That's why I keep telling you, if you think this is a knowledge-based exam, or if you think, okay, the person who's getting the first rank, highly knowledgeable, not necessary. I'm not telling they're not knowledgeable. It is not necessary. Even if you don't have that kind of knowledge, still you can do well. Simple. The first ranker this time, who's from PSIR, is not from PSIR background. From science background. There are many people who are from PSIR background, but yet they have not even got interview call. The reason is simple, because two things are very different. Yeah, PSIR guy might have more knowledge, but that does not matter. Now what matters is that what is there on that paper, what is there within that 150 words. And that's why I told, that is something you have to constantly keep thinking while preparing. And that's why we say, end of the day, some people will tell, no, optional is something what you have to like, optional is something like a marriage, etc. There's nothing called as marriage, nothing called as liking. Only thing is that, is it giving you marks? Whether you like it, whether you dislike it, all you get is that, are you getting the marks? It's always better liking something and not getting marks, rather than disliking something and where it is getting marks. I always will choose the second one here. Simple. There's no connection. You can't tell, I want to become IFS, that's why I'll take political science. No, you can take Kannada literature and also become IFS. You can also take PubAd and become IPS. You can take PSIR and become IAS. That's not the logic. Some logic is what? I want to become IFS, that is why I'll take PSIR. I want to become IAS, I want to take PubAd. Then what will Pali literature they'll do? So there's no connection to that. The only connection is that, can you score well? Is it scoring? Can I get that marks? Rest is history. You don't know that subject well, it's fine. But are you getting the scores? Simple, na? End of the day, people will also see that only, na? When your selection list is in, they don't care whether you know the subject or not. Have you got the marks or not? So that's why I told in this UPSC exam, even in GS papers, your main criteria is about how to maximize your marks. It should not be about I'll become an expert in economics, I'll become an expert in polity. In generally also, you see, those who succeed, right, they're very smart. Those who don't succeed, right, they're not so smart. I'll tell you one example how they're not so smart. For example, let us think now this India-Pakistan issue. Let us think you have not yet gone to interview, still a person who's studying in prelim stage. Now you start thinking, okay, now what Pakistan might do, what are the options, how India's military command will work. Why do you need that for a prelim stage? What do you need? National Security Council took the decision. Know about that first. NSC, who is the head of it, who will be part of it. Okay, in case tomorrow there should be a nuclear, there is something called as Nuclear Command Authority. Okay, know about that, who is the head of it. Don't sit and waste your time thinking about, okay, now what will happen, what Pakistan. Second, when you go to interview stage, that time you can prepare on those lines. If they ask in the board, like, okay, what will you think about the future of India-Pakistan relation? Again, so it also depends upon at what stage what you are reading. It also depends upon how much you know. You might be a military expert. You might know everything. The question is that in paper it won't come now. Prelims, of course, they can't ask that one. No? Prelims, they have to ask something which is objective. They can't ask something which is subjective. So that's why I told that clarity if you have at which stage of the exam, what you need to read and how much effort you have to put into that, then getting the result is not so difficult. Result will come by. But when you lack that clarity, what to read, when to read, how to read, you're just blinded saying that I'm going to just read. Then there's no end to it. Means you find there's no end to your boundary. You find there's no end to your knowledge. And that's why I told here also same thing. Don't try to think out a lot. Just think out previous year questions. But you have to know the concepts. If you don't know the concept, then it doesn't work out. A basic concept. But again, I said multiple revisions will give you clarity over this concept. Means now we have read Plato. It's not that you have to leave Plato, you have to keep revising Plato. Then your understanding will become better. So let us take few questions on Locke to see that how they have asked questions here. So one question you take down. One question you take down. Locke is an individualist, out and out. Locke is an individualist. Locke is an individualist. Out and out. Substantiate this statement. Substantiate this statement. $15 marks. Substantiate this statement. Yeah, what will you write? What will you write here? For one sentence, you are writing one more sentence. They are also telling the same thing. Locke is individual, out and out. You are also telling the same thing. He started and he ended as in, okay, how? Same, that you need to explain. So you need to explain where in his ideas individualism is there. From the point of time of state of nature to human nature to social contract, after creating of the contract, the existence of rights, he told it is based on consent of the individual. He allowed individual to follow his religious choice. He said that individual's liberty, life, property are sacrosanct. It can't be taken away by the state. He created a kind of contract where first individuals will sign the contract to enter into a civil society, and this civil society then enters into contract with the state. So out and out, if you see his whole ideas, that what one told, everything in Locke revolves around individualism. But one thing what you can add here is that Macpherson's critic of saying that Locke is a proponent of possessive individualism. That's it. It's a very straightforward question. All you have to write is explain that why and how you consider him as a individualist. So if you want to start your answer, you can start by saying what is individualism. Then you can connect and write in Locke his work, what is written, the essay concerning the human nature, as well as two treatises on government. That in these two works we can say a lot of thoughts of Locke revolves around individual. So write about, he says about individual as reason. He says that in state of nature individual cooperates, etc. He says about because there is some inconvenience created for individual, that is why they enter a contract. How do they enter a contract? They come as individuals, free willing individuals to sign the contract. Then you said once the contract is created, still individual continue to enjoy his right to life, liberty and property, that is natural rights. State cannot take away these rights. For him, state is the means, individual is the end. He is given the right to the individual to revolt against the state if there is a breach of contract. He says that state should be tolerant to the views of individual. State should allow individuals to follow their own religious choice. So everything in Locke is revolving, one more, right to property. He allows individual have the right to property. And last you write about what? However, Macpherson has criticized John Locke as what? Proponent of possessive individualism. Explain what is possessive individualism. Then you write your answer that contribution of Locke. This Locke's ideology led to him being called as what? Father of liberalism. Or you can write that statement what he told in starting. Locke started as an individualist and also ended as an individualist. Anyway, so you are understanding the point. Maybe in the notes it is not there in that format. In note it is there in bits and pieces at places. You need to connect and write. You are understanding the point. Don't expect in any GS1, GS2 or any paper where you will have a notes where it is exactly in the form of the question they have asked. If it is something like that, you are lucky. There might be few questions, but majority of the questions will be in such a way that it will be based on content what you have read. But you need to rearrange that content based on what is the demand of the question they have asked in the exam. Or sometimes you will have to add additional content if you feel that okay, this content is not sufficient. Understood? Got the point? Any doubt here in this question? So next question you take on. John Locke is the father of liberalism. Explain. John Locke is the father of liberalism. Explain. John Locke is the father of liberalism. Explain. 20 marks you have to write. So this was asked in 2018 UPSC. What will you write? See, the initial period always what you feel like, right? You know, but you are not able to write. That is some problem we'll always face. Some question we know, but when it comes to writing, the flow does not come so easily. That is only you have to practice. Okay, but think what will you write, what you can write. Do bit of brainstorming. Hmm? Okay, similar, but what will you write? What will be your introduction here? Liberty? Why will you write about liberty of individual instead of? Okay, why do you call Gandhi the father of Indian national movement? Right, if they ask a question, Gandhi, the father of Indian nationalism, comment. What will you write? Basically, you have to write what is Gandhi's contribution to the Indian national movement. Same way here, you have to write about what is John Locke's contribution to the evolution of the idea of liberalism. So, first of all, you have to tell what is liberalism. You can say liberalism is an ideology that emerged in 17th century or 18th century, where the core idea of liberalism was individual is the center of the thought process, where liberalism believed that state should be limited, individual should have rights. So the traces or the seeds of this idea was initially sowed by John Locke. You know, right? John Locke has written two important works. The essay concerning human understanding and two treatises on government. Then go on explaining each idea that how he is connected to liberalism. So when you write about his whole thought process is surrounding around individual. He believes that individual has reason. He believes in the idea of a constitutional state. He spoke about right to property as central, means an individual should have right to property, private property. Then he has also spoke about the theory of consent, means people's consent should be there. He spoke about the idea of limited state. And means state limited state means state powers are limited by the emergence of natural rights. Okay, then you can also speak about that Locke also spoke about toleration. So all these key ideas are part of the liberal ideology. So the initial seeds of this was sowed by Locke. Later these were expanded by the other liberal scholars who emerged in later periods. And that is why Lusky says that Rousseau and other liberal scholars have merely widened the channels that has been already dug by Locke. This will be my flow. Points 1 or 2 you can add if you are able to recall any other point. But this should be the structure of the answer, what you are going to write. Got it? And that's why I told you, in answer writing, structure is very important. If you get the structure correct, content 1 or 2 points, it's fine. One fellow will write 1 point, other fellow can write another point. But it's more important is able to structure your answer. Structure meaning what? You need to clearly have the vision saying that, okay, this is how my answer is going to flow. And that's why I told, for that what you need to do is that you have to do thinking. What many people think is that by writing your answer writing skill will improve. That is a misconception. By writing your answer writing skill will not improve. It is through thinking your answer writing skill will improve, because you write what you can think. So when you say your writing speed is slow, it means your thinking speed is slow. It doesn't mean you are writing slow. You are not able to get points within that given time. Why you are not able to get points within that given time? Because you have not thought about it. What do you mean by thought? You did not sit when you read, thought about it. Okay, what are the different questions that can come? Okay, what points I can write? Simple, na? If I give you 7 minutes and tell uniform civil code is need of the hour, comment. 7 minutes you have to write. What will happen? Suddenly you might not get many points. And what you will start doing, you will just start randomly writing whatever you means you will jumble everything, whatever you know. Shah ban okay, Shaira ban okay, Article 44, etc., etc. But let us think, had you answered this question before and had you prepared in a systematic way, you have that structure. Okay, I'm going to introduce with Uniform Civil Code comes under DPSP, Article 44. Then I'm going to write what is Uniform Civil Code, that there should be a common set of civil laws for all citizens irrespective of their religious background. Then you are going to write, okay, why do we need a uniform civil code? You are going to bring angle of women empowerment. One more angle you are going to bring about secularism. Third angle you can bring about the judicial verdicts what they have given in Shah Banu and Shah. Fourth you can say it will reduce the burden on judiciary because they have to apply different laws to different sections. Fourth you will write efficiency will improve. Why? Because many times there is misuse of the religious laws, personal laws which are there. But then you already would have thought about, okay, there are challenges also to bring uniform civil code. One, what you are going to say, constitutional contradiction. Article 44 says that there should be a uniform civil code. Article 25 says that you can follow your own religious customs and traditions. Second, you are going to say India is a multicultural society. So obviously 5th schedule, 6th schedule has given protection to tribal communities. So you are giving example in Uttarakhand when they exempted the tribals from uniform civil code. Third, you are going to bring that bringing a uniform civil code might also, it is what there is a view, say that it is not a silver bullet to resolving all gender issues. Fourth, how to build that consensus, how to arrive at a common point. So then you will write what is the way forward. First, consensus has to be built. Or you can say there is also suggestion that instead of bringing a uniform civil code, you can bring codification of every personal law. What do you mean by codification? Like how Hindu laws have been codified. So like Islamic laws need to be codified, Christian laws need to be codified. That is what you are going to write. When you are able to do this, if you are prepared. What I mean by preparation, you should have written, you should have thought about it. Let us think the question came directly, you have just listened to what is uniform civil code, not prepared. Then what will happen? Your answer will be haphazardous. Means you are going to just write whatever is going to come to your mind at that moment. You are getting the point. That's why I told for mains, you can't just read randomly and go right. That is why many people score low in GS also. They think about GS writing is what? Okay, I'm just randomly reading Lakshmikant. I'm randomly reading. Lakshmikant is a basic book. Lakshmikant is not a mains book. Reading Lakshmikant, you can do prelims well. You can't do mains well. There are many parts in this syllabus where you have to have your own set of notes. You have to have your own set of issues identified. For example, Parliament is there. Now recently, if you read Hindu newspaper, there is an article where they spoke about why private members bill in India, the passing ratio is very less. And they spoke about what is the significance of private members bill. Why I am telling specifically, he has given very good examples in that article. He told, for example, the transgenders bill, what was there? It is actually framed on a private members bill which was initially introduced. Now let us think they asked this question this year. Unless you are not prepared specifically, you won't be able to write. You will just write what you recall, private members bill, what is private members bill, it is discussed on every Friday, etc. But you never brought the analysis. Let us think a person who specifically read on it, he will give all these examples and you only logically think whom the evaluator will give more marks. You are getting the point? That's the problem, especially in Bangalore. The people think that just reading Lakshmikant is the end of polity. Reading Lakshmikant or what you attend in class, that's just the basic. It's a very basic thing. It's not something you're doing great regarding you're able to answer GS2. The problem here, that's what I told. The problem here is that if you try to take this private members bill issue and discuss in class, students won't listen because they find it very complex to understand. For them, simple, who is MLA, who is MP, who is this constitution, etc. That even NCRT fellow will do all that. They are aiming to become an IS, but they are preparing like a clerk. There is a complete mismatch between their preparation and the goal what they are aiming for. So how will you succeed? You won't. And that's why I told preparation is very important. I mean, that's what I told. When you write an answer, if you have written that answer before, you have already a structure in mind. Why? Because while practicing the answer, even if you make a mistake, you are thinking what else I can add, what else I can bring. Now let us think this question, they ask again in exam. They won't ask as father of liberalism, they ask John Locke as contribution to liberalism. You are ready. Why you are ready? Because already you have written an answer on it, already you have thought about it. Got it? And that's why if you see why in optional papers, usually students, any optional, I'm not telling only political science, in any optional paper, they'll score 160, 170. Toppers, I'm telling, not all. In GS paper, can you score 160? Very, very rare. Simple, even this time, if you take GS average score, ethics has scored bit 130, 120 range. But if you take again GS paper, yeah, people will go up to 125. Means they are not struggling to score above the 50% of the marks. But in an optional, usually you can score above the 50% of the marks. The reason is simple. In optional, repeated questions are more. So your structure is ready to write the answer. In GS, the number of repeated questions are very less because they keep asking on newer issues. So unless you have not prepared on that issue, you won't be able to write. So what will you write? You will just write what you know. And that's why they won't give higher marks. Got an idea? So understood that why you need to brainstorm. Brainstorm means don't just blindly write, think that what you have to write. So here they asked about father of liberalism, means I have to write about contribution to liberalism. So first in my answer I have to introduce what is liberalism. Then I am going to connect the point how this fellow presented ideas that later on went on to develop the idea of liberalism. In conclusion, what did I write? The statement of Lusky, where he told Rousseau and other liberal scholars have merely widened the channels that was already dug by John Locke. Got it? Any doubt here? Next question you take down. Next question. It is said, where there is no law, it is said, where there is no law, there is no liberty. It is said, where there is no law, there is no liberty. Said where there is no law, there is no liberty. Give your view on this statement. Give your view on this statement. Give your view on this statement. So how will you address this question? What you can write? No, see, first you read this statement, where there is no law, then they are not telling Locke, they are not telling Hobbes, it's just a statement. Where there is no law, there is no liberty. So obviously the question is asking relation between law and liberty. They are not telling Locke, they are not telling Hobbes. I can write anything I want. So first I will introduce my answer by saying that this statement reflects relation between law and liberty. First I am going to explain the thesis part. The meaning of who is saying that when there is no law, there is no liberty, or why when there is no law, there is no liberty. So basically this statement reflects what? Positive correlation between law and liberty. The statement says that law is very essential, or the end of the law is to enhance the liberty of individuals. Then I am going to connect John Locke here. Then I am going to say which law he is speaking about. So then his point, natural law. And then I am going to explain that how natural law enhances the liberty of individual. And if this natural law is not there, there is no limitation on the powers of the state, and the state can take away your liberty. Now here I don't need to just limit to Locke, I can give any example I want, because they are not asking only Locke, right? They can give your view on this statement. So I will tell, if you take initially when monarchs were there, when they ruled arbitrarily, when there was no check on power, it resulted in what? It resulted in taking away the liberty of individuals. For example, slavery. For example, in ancient India, in that regard, when you can say certain sections of the society, they lost freedom or liberty. Why? Because there was no law which spoke about equal rights of all. Hence, law is essential to enhance individual liberty. So I can give also the example of Article 17, the same thing what we discussed, Protection of Civil Rights Act. How this has enhanced the liberty of individuals. But then I am going to also say, but at the same time, it can be also seen, now I will bring Hobbes' viewpoint, that when there is law, there is no liberty. So I am going to explain the Hobbesian interpretation here. Why his argument is that when there is law, there is no liberty. So I will relate Hobbes because this is a 20 marker question. State of nature, when people are there, when law comes, you have to blindly obey the state. And I am then going to speak about my viewpoint, saying that when we are discussing about law and liberty, we have to also speak about what kind of liberty. A law should not only speak about negative liberty, a law can be also brought to enhance positive liberty. For example, in India, we have Right to Education Act. Then I am going to summarize it. Yes, law can play a key role in enhancing the life of the individual, but it also depends upon the tenets of the law. So that's why I told, in this question, it's not like just a Locke question or a Hobbesian question, it's just a statement. I need to bring my view. But yeah, since it's a political science paper, I will write about Locke, I will write about Hobbes, because it's not a general studies paper. It's an optional paper. So as an optional student, I have to bring my optional knowledge in the paper. Maybe if the same question they asked in ethics paper, I can write about Locke, or in general also I can answer. Same question can come in ethics also. So that's the difference when you write the answer in a GS paper and the answer what you write in an optional paper. I am going to give general examples, but I am going to link my answer with ideas of Locke and ideas of Hobbes. Got it? Understood? So that's what I told. Many times questions we have to invent. We have to make slight modifications. We have to bring our own ideas onto the paper. Initially, it might means we'll have doubts, can this example be suitable or not? That's a phase that you have to trial and error. Trial and error means some questions you have to write, maybe it goes wrong. Why? Because maybe the examples what we are giving might not be matching the question. But if you keep trying it, you will get that accuracy, that which examples you can give, where you can give. So understood for this question, how to approach it. So they have not given us Locke, they have just given a statement. It is said where there is law, so if there is no law, there is no liberty. So this is a Lockean perspective. First I am going to explain that, give examples for it, then I am going to bring in Hobbesian perspective, give example for it, then I am going to conclude my answer. Understood? Any doubt? Next question you take down, one more question. It's a big question, take down. The great and the chief aim. The great and chief aim. Great and the chief aim of men. Chief aim of men uniting. Men uniting into a commonwealth. Into a commonwealth. Uniting into a commonwealth and putting themselves under the government, is the preservation of property. is the preservation of property. Locke. Comment. Take 20 marks. So let us think this is a new quote we have never read or heard before. But still, once you read the quote and if you understand the quote, easily you will be able to write the answer. First read the quote, try to understand the quote. And first tell me what you understood by the quote. So basically the question is on, in simple terms, if I have to simplify the question, it's basically simple terms of why people sign social contract according to Locke. That is the question. In simple terms, you know. So if you see there, the great and chief aim means what? What is why men means people are uniting into a commonwealth. Commonwealth refers to state. Commonwealth means they are creating a common authority. The great and chief aim of men uniting into a commonwealth means why they are signing a contract is putting themselves under a government, means they need a government. Means he told two contracts. Now one they will create civil society and that civil society will sign a contract to establish a state or a government. For what? Preservation of property, means protection of their property. Here property, don't read it as just narrowly. For Locke, property means liberty, life and property. All are properties of an individual. So in your answer, first you have to go back to Locke's description of human nature. Then with that you need to connect to Locke's state of nature, where he told it is peaceful, goodwill, mutual assistance, preservation. But then you have to tell there is one problem. What is that one problem? Certain inconveniences. And what is that certain inconveniences? There is no common judge. Everybody is the judge of their own case. And this will result in disputes. Now to resolve these disputes, why you want to resolve these disputes? Because you need a common authority to resolve and ensure that your life, liberty and property are protected. And that is why people enter into a contract. And in this they sign two contracts. One to create a civil society, the other is to create a state. And the state has a responsibility. The state has a responsibility of what? The state has a responsibility of protecting your life, protecting your property, because all these three, life, liberty, property, are natural rights of an individual, and these rights cannot be taken away by the state. And the chief aim of creating the state was to give this protection. If the state fails to perform these functions, he also speaks about that you can revolt against the state. By giving this idea, Locke has laid down the foundations of a constitutional government or a limited state. Your answer is done. That's why I told it's an easy question. The only thing is that if you just read a statement which is a bit different, you should not get scared. You have to just look at what they are telling you. So look there, the great and chief aim of men uniting into a commonwealth is to putting themselves under a government. For what? Preservation of property. So in simple sense, he is telling why in a Lockean state of nature people signed a contract. That you need to explain. You have to start with human nature, state of nature, the contract, post-contract, what is the chief aim of the government. Also, if government fails, government is like a trustee. If they fail to keep up the trust of the contract, then the people have the right to change the government. Understood? So that's why I told. They just keep giving these statements. Why? Because they might give one more statement one more year. But the answer what you're going to write is going to be the same. State of nature, human nature, social contract. Got it? Any doubt in this part? Anybody did not understand? Yeah, take down this question, let us take. It is hard indeed. It is hard. It is hard indeed. It is hard indeed to turn the Lockean doctrine. Hard indeed to turn the Lockean doctrine into any kind of unqualified democratic theory. Any kind of unqualified democratic theory. Comment. Sorry, discuss. It's a statement made by Macpherson. It's a statement made by Macpherson. So read this statement again. Think that what you can write. It is hard indeed to turn any kind of Lockean doctrine into any kind of unqualified democratic theory. So that's why I don't. Okay, you can closely relate to something like you're right, something related to possessive individualism, but how you are going to connect that? What you told is correct. It is somewhat indirectly connected to the idea of, means he was a critic. So from that you can make a guess. This something is not praising him. This something which criticizing him. But why I am telling is that even though it is linked to possessive individualism, you need to imply from it. Means it's not a direct question. One of the reasons you have not yet read the theories of democracy. Topic has been not yet done. So when you read the topic, that time you will understand what is the meaning of an unqualified democracy. Or if you have read your basics good, NCRT books well, then you will know the difference between what is a qualified democracy and what is an unqualified democracy. I think most of you have read NCRTs, right? So what is the difference between a qualified democracy and an unqualified democracy? You understood why NCRTs are important, why basics are important, because in mains, even one word, if you know that word, you will get an idea. If you don't know that word, then it will be very difficult to get the idea. So I'll first tell what is the basic difference between a qualified democracy and an unqualified democracy. Currently in India, if we see the system what we have, are we a qualified democracy or are we an unqualified democracy? We are an unqualified democracy, meaning any citizen of this country, whether he is educated, whether he is uneducated, whether he has property, whether he does not have property, if he is a citizen of this country, you have, and you are above 18 years, registered as a voter, you can vote in the election. But the opposite idea to it is the idea of qualified democracy. Qualified means everybody cannot vote here. It's only the elite. Who are the elite? Educated property class. So if you look at British rule in India, or even if you take the Government of India Act 1935 or the Government of India Act 1919, the British did not introduce in India the unqualified model of democracy, they brought qualified democracy. Meaning, only those who have property, those who have education, only they were giving voting rights. That was the case in Europe also, if you see. Now, why that logic was there? When you read the next thinker, what you are going to read, J.S. Mill, you will understand that, because J.S. Mill, when he brought his writings was at the time when British had colonized India. The same time period when British had colonized India. So this Mill's viewpoint was that he says that people have struggled a lot, like this American Revolution, French Revolution, people have lost their lives for establishing what? For establishing democracy. And he told his main concern for Mill was that we need to protect this democracy in future, and he told we can't distribute democracy everywhere like a free gift. For democracy to function well, you need people to have some qualifications. That's the idea of a qualified democracy. What is unqualified democracy? Irrespective of which qualification you have, you are part of our democratic process. Okay. Now here, in that context, if you understand, it is hard indeed for the Lockean doctrine into any kind of unqualified democracy. Means Macpherson is criticizing Locke, saying that the idea of democracy, what this fellow is promoting, it's more an elitist idea. He's only focusing on right to ownership of property. He's only focusing those individuals who possess things. They can be part of this democratic process. He does not have any concern for those people who don't have. He's a promoter of capitalist model of democracy. So what he's saying is that if you look at these Locke's ideas or Locke's philosophy, he says that it is hard indeed to turn it into any kind of unqualified democratic theory. These fellows' ideas are mooting more of what? A qualified democratic theory. Understanding? That's why I told indirectly it is linked to possessive individualism. Because possessive individualism is connected to the idea of promoter capitalism. So, Macpherson was a critic of Locke's doctrine, saying that what he is speaking about, he is not giving you an unqualified democracy or so-called what we call as a constitutional state. For him, it is only the elite that matters. That is why his central thought, right to ownership of private property. So for this you will have to understand, when you read theories of democracy, what is a qualified model of democracy and what is an unqualified. And this is why this is a difficult question, because here you can't just answer on Locke. You need to connect to the idea of democracy. So this you can only answer once your democracy topic is done. Then you will be able to connect and you will be able to write. So as I told, these kind of questions you can avoid starting in the first round of study. These kind of questions you can start writing once you have completed the entire syllabus. But the previous questions what you wrote, those can be answered alone based on what you have read about Locke and Hobbes. Got it? So understood here, understand what is qualified democracy, unqualified democracy. So India is what type of democracy? We are an unqualified democracy. So if you take in some states like Rajasthan, Haryana, in panchayats, they have introduced the idea of qualified model of democracy, meaning you should be at least 8th standard educated for you to contest panchayat elections. But there is no kind of qualifications required for you to contest MLA elections, MP elections. There is no kind of qualification required for you to be a voter in the election. The only thing is that you have to be a citizen of this country, you should be above 18 and you should be registered in one of the constituency as a voter. Got it? Understood? So these are the major questions in what? John Locke, which you will have to know. So what you have to do is that read the notes. Just read the notes 2-3 times. You won't understand if you read only one time. You need to do it repeatedly. Then once you read, once you revise, then you take up questions. Look at different questions. Don't try to just answer question without reading. It is useless. What do you mean by answering question without reading? or just copying from the notes and writing, that won't work. Read the notes 2-3 times, then take up question, then sit and think that what you can write. Got it? Now, the other important scholar that we'll have to do is J.S. Mill. As I told, again, he is also from England. Okay. Now, first I'll give an outline that what we have to read about Mill. So, this J.S. Mill, he's a, what you can say, his teacher who is there, or his master who is there, his name is Bentham, Jeremy Bentham. Okay. Jeremy Bentham. So, why we need to know about Jeremy Bentham, even though it's not there in syllabus, because to understand Mill's idea, or one of the major idea given by Mill was to reform something called as utilitarianism. And who was one of the founders or proponent of utilitarian philosophy? It was Jeremy Bentham. So first you need to understand about the philosophy of utilitarianism, which was brought by Jeremy Bentham and which had gained popularity in England back in 17th century. Okay. But what will happen that utilitarianism will come under very harsh criticism, and this fellow being the student, he'll try to bring changes to the idea of utilitarianism. So that is why first we'll have to know about Bentham and his philosophy of utilitarianism. Then we'll have to connect with J.S. Mill. But if you look at major works that is written by J.S. Mill, one you have On Liberty, you have Subjection of Women, you have Women Suffrage, these are certain important works which are written by J.S. Mill. So his father was James Mill. Okay, this fellow is John Stuart Mill. His father was James Mill, and James Mill was contemporary to what? Jeremy Bentham. And J.S. Mill's important ideas basis on his views on liberty. This is one of the most important theories of J.S. Mill. That is why we say, if there is anybody who is liberal, that is J.S. Mill, because he is a strong advocate and a staunch supporter of freedom of speech and expression. And second major idea you have to look about is about his views on democracy. Means he was one of the hardcore supporter of a democratic form of government. But there are a lot of contradictions that we'll explore once we read about his idea of democracy. Then he also reformed the utilitarian philosophy. Then he was a strong advocate for voting rights. For women. Strong advocate for voting rights for women. So these are the major ideas about J.S. Mill that you will have to be studying for your examination point of view. His views on liberty, his views on democracy, how he reformed utilitarianism, and his support or his demand for what voting rights should be given to women. Okay. That's it, what you have to be reading in Mill. So we have to start our understanding of Mill from where? Jeremy Bentham. More important, the philosophy given by Jeremy Bentham, that is what? Utilitarian philosophy. Now, as I told, this utilitarian philosophy started gaining traction in 16th and 17th century. So, utilitarianism in England was popularly called as the philosophy of common man. was called as the philosophy of common man. Why it is philosophy of common man? If you look Plato, if you look this Socrates and all, they are very difficult to understand by common man. Right? If you go explain Plato's theory of soul to somebody who is selling pani puri on road, tell what the hell are you speaking? But this fellow's utilitarian philosophy is very easy for common. It's very simple. He told a very simple thing. He told, what is the ultimate goal of any policy? What is the ultimate goal of any state? Simple, he told. Maximum happiness. Maximum happiness for the maximum number of people. What he told utilitarian is promote maximum happiness or maximum good for maximum number of people. That should be ultimate goal of policy. So what Jeremy Bentham told, utility is very important, not liberty. Liberty is there, but above liberty is what? Utility. And he told there is nothing called as higher degree of happiness, lower degree of happiness, unlike what the Socrates told about true happiness, no false happiness. He told there is nothing like that. All happiness is one and the same. And in fact, he told there is no difference between pleasure. There is no difference between pleasure and happiness. He told there is one and the same. So he said, the happiness what you get from reading poetry and the happiness what you get playing, there is this called as game of pins in Russia. Both are same. It doesn't make any difference. He told it's all about maximizing the happiness, and he told we can quantify it. Quantifying, we can make a measurement of what decision will lead to how much happiness. So your ultimate goal is what? Promote maximum happiness for maximum number of people. So he told there is no difference between pleasure and happiness, and he told you can quantify pleasure or happiness. And he also invented a calculus for it called as Felific calculus. So what is the ultimate role of the government? It has to promote maximum good for maximum number. It was plain and simple. It's a very easy philosophy to understand. That is why it is called as what? Philosophy of common man. This was the idea. But, and he told why this should be the idea. He told similar to what Hobbes had told. He also told because every man is ruled by two masters. That is what? Pleasure and pain. And what is your ultimate goal? To maximize pleasure, minimize pain. That you can also think as, if it is something is giving happiness to maximum number of people, but it is causing pain to minimum number of people, it's good, it's correct, it's fine. We don't care about the minority. It's the majority. But this philosophy came under intense criticism from many quarters. One person was Carlyle. He called this, Bentham's utilitarianism as pig's philosophy. He called it as what? Pig's philosophy. Now, why he called it as pig philosophy? He said like what this fellow is telling, that you promote maximum good for maximum. Ultimately, you have to be happy and it should give you pleasure. If that is the case, he told, then what is the difference between you and the pigs? Pig will eat anything in the gutter to just fill his stomach. Pig does not differentiate between this I can eat, even it will eat human shit. It's fine. Stomach should be full. I should feel satisfied. It doesn't matter what it consumes. So it is the same thing here. You are telling there is no difference between pleasure and happiness, and you consume everything you want which gives you happiness. Then pig also eats in gutter to fill its appetite. It feels pleasurable, means one stomach is full. It's happy. So that is why they called it, they criticized it as what? Pig's philosophy. Like how a pig does not differentiate between what is good or bad. It will eat everything. Means it is only quantification. They are not speaking about quality. Means the critique was that all happiness and all pleasure are not one and the same. There is a difference in quality, which he had ignored. And you had one more person called as John Rawls. John Rawls, who criticized this philosophy, saying that what this Bentham has done, he has given superior position to utility rather than liberty. He is given superior position to utility rather than liberty. Means he is taking away the liberty of few minorities or few people, promoting the. So for Rawls, he told that can't be justice. So what is Bentham's point of view of justice? Maximum good for maximum number. Why? Because this idea of justice cannot be applied everywhere. Because justice is an idea that varies from situation to situation. That Amartya Sen told. Amartya Sen told this as a critic to whom? Rawls. Because later you will understand. Rawls criticizing this Bentham, he will give an idea of justice. You understand? Rawls criticizing Bentham, saying this utilitarianism will not work, and he will give his idea of justice. That I won't tell now, I will tell in detail when you do Rawls. But in summary, he gives a procedural idea of justice. Means he will tell if you do these things, justice will be served. And he told this is universal, you can apply it anywhere. For which Amartya Sen will question is that there is nothing called as universal idea of justice. The idea of justice will always emerge from which society we belong to. And that is why when we take as an example, now let us think now she is a rail operator. She is operating a train. And as I told her, like I think we have discussed this before, I don't know. We have discussed this before, right? Operating a train. And now let us think she will, she can't speak. She is deaf and she can't hear also, but she can only see. Train is going. And when the train is going, there are 100 people working on the track. There is, on other track, there is only one person working. Now maximum what she can do is that change the track. She can't do anything beyond that. She has to make a choice. Kill 100 or kill one. Choice is hers. She can take either choice. She can one tell the train is going on this track. That is what God is destined. I can't help. 100 will have to die. Or she'll change the track. I am going to save 100, but I am going to take life of one person because this is the best I can do because I am promoting maximum good for maximum number. Okay, that is in this situation. Now let us reverse this situation. She tomorrow becomes a district collector, DC, in some state. Now in her district, in a particular village, there is a government school. One day, 90% of the parents in that school, along with children, they'll come and protest in front of her office. 90%. 10% are going. Their claim or their demand to her is that they want her to fire the cook who's cooking the midday meal program, who's a woman. They'll tell, if you don't fire her, we are not going to send our children to school. The school will close down. Choice is yours. What will you do? So she will make inquiry, okay, why these are asking her to be removed. And her inquiry reveals that woman who is cooking the food is a Dalit. And all these people are upper caste. So that's a caste issue. So she will inquire how the food is prepared. The report says that quality is good, she is cooking well. The only problem is that she belongs to this community. Question for her. Will she use the same principle what she applied in the case of rail? There she applied the principle what? Kill one, save 100. Can that same principle be applied here? Fire one, get 90% of the students to school. The answer remains no. So the idea of justice is not same everywhere. You can't promote everywhere utilitarianism. That is what maximum good for the maximum number. because the word good is relative. Got it? So that is why this philosophy came under lot of criticism. And to address this criticism, this is where John Stuart Mill, he brought certain modifications within the idea of utilitarianism. And that is why they call them, he is the Peter who defied his master. And he is the student who changed the ideas of his master. So that we'll look into next class, that what were the modification brought by J.S. Mill with respect to this utilitarian philosophy given by Jeremy Bentham. Okay, this utilitarianism we will read again when we read theories of justice. That's why I connected that to the idea of justice. So understood. So that is what Amartya Sen told, there can't be one idea of justice. Justice cannot be universal. Justice is not a procedure. Justice is more action oriented. He told Niti is different, Nyaya is different. So he told Rawls, what you are telling is Niti, what you are telling is not Nyaya. So he gave the example of Bhagavad Gita, the conversation between Sri Krishna and Arjuna, where Arjuna will tell, I will not fight the battle. Why? Because he'll tell it is not the correct procedure. I can't take up arms against my own guru who is fighting on the opposite camp. But what Krishna will tell, if you follow the Niti here, you won't win the war. And for him, winning the war is more important, because for he told, justice should be served. And the same logic, what you can say, the Indian attack on Pakistan. If somebody speaks about, human rights activists come and speak out, human right is there, that is there, this is there. Every time, ahimsa does not mean you just remain silent, know what has done. Certain times lessons have to be taught. You will have to take up the weapons when it becomes inevitable. Weapon was not the first choice, but it has become the choice. And that's why you can say even what Sri Krishna told in Bhagavad Gita, when time comes, you will have to fight. And that is why he told Arjuna, don't think about the Niti, just go for safeguarding Dharma. And that is why if you look at the whole Mahabharata, Sri Krishna tricked the Kauravas. It was not like procedurally correct, right? He tricked them. At various stages he tricked them. But still he defended it, saying that what? End of the day, he told, Dharma should be established. That's what this Amartya Sen told. Nyaya is action oriented. Nyaya does not mean always that you follow a procedure. Certain times you can break the procedure also to establish justice. That he told in relation to Rawls' idea. Because Rawls had told justice is what? Follow a procedure. Understood? What do you mean by procedural idea of justice? Substantiative idea of justice. Got it? Understood? So this is where we link this utilitarian philosophy. So that we'll take up in your next class.